Well, we are moving closer and closer to shovels in the ground in Brook Park, and the debate over whether to build the stadium pretty much over. It's going to be built, but now we start to look at the financials.
So what does this mean financially for the city of Cleveland? What does it mean financially for the region? Hard questions to answer, right? The numbers show it's almost impossible to get a handle on what will actually happen. The Haslams Sports Group claims the move from the downtown stadium to a premier indoor stadium in Brook Park will be the catalyst for transformative change region-wide. Mayor Justin Bibb, County Executive Chris Ronayne see the exact opposite. They claim downtown momentum, economic prosperity is at stake, and some local businesses will simply close up shop. And both sides produced economic development studies to back up their claims. And those studies are night and day. The city claims there will be a loss of at least $30 million in economic output and a loss of $11 million in tax revenue. That's a total loss of at least $41 million. Not only does the Haslams Sports Group study dispute that, they claim economic output in the city will actually grow by $11 million a year as the Browns play in Brook Park. With numbers this wildly different, how do we decide what to believe?
And that's difficult to do when you have one side saying this is actually going to be a loss and another saying it's going to be a gain.
Jonathan Ernest is a professor of economics at Case Western Reserve. He says these studies involve money multipliers. In this case, the city's study assumes the Browns move and those dollars just move with them, multiplied by the jobs and taxes created by the Browns downtown. But the study produced by the Haslams assumes an influx of visitors and their cash into specifically downtown Cleveland, attracted by the events at the indoor stadium.
Are they still staying in hotels in the downtown area? Are they still walking around, going to the other venues, touring the Rock Hall the day before, after the concert, going to other events?
The financials include the possibility that events at a new indoor stadium would simply strip away events from Rocket Arena. A study from the Greater Cleveland Partnership shows that Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, home of the Colts, averages about 50 events a year. The current Browns Stadium hosts on average just 13 events a year, and that adds up to 2 million in attendance at Lucas Oil Stadium and only 750,000 at Huntington Bank Field. Now, the Haslam study claims an indoor stadium could bring up to an additional 1.5 million visitors. Attendance up over 2 million people at a new indoor stadium. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, where the NBA's Pacers play, still brings in 2 million people a year. Rocket Arena, 2.1 million. Those are comparable numbers.
What's likely to happen is sort of a mix of both. Some events that wouldn't have come to the city at all might come to the city now instead. Some events that would have taken place downtown would now be moved to Brook Park into this large domed facility.
All right, there's one other thing to note here. Lucas Oil Stadium is in downtown Indianapolis, just a short walk to their arena. Does that make a difference? To be honest, probably. Same goes for indoor stadiums and arenas in Detroit and Minneapolis. So those are just two more varying factors that could play a role in the future of these financials. All right, these are the issues we continue to tackle each week of the Stadium Showdown. A new episode streams live Friday at 6:30 on 19 News Plus. You can watch our past episodes anytime you'd like.
Now